Hello and welcome to another Code Lab video tutorial for client-side web development. Today we are looking at Module 10, exploring arrays, loops, and conditional statements, and we are doing the trophy case sports case problem. Okay, so let's begin. So the story is Sarah Nordheim manages the website for Trophy Case Sports, a sports memorabilia store located in Beaver Creek, Ohio. So she's asked us to work on creating a script, a JavaScript, uh, for the shopping cart page for the checkout process. So this should be very interesting. So the script should take information on the items that the customer has purchased and present it in tabular form. So if we imagine a checkout process, we're going to have a series of items, the quantity, the price, and a total. Okay. And we've worked with creating dynamic tables in previous modules. Okay, so Sarah has already designed the page. So we have CSS files and some HTML markup code. And so let's begin. Just a note too, this build website button is just the refresh button on the bottom right here. And that's for just refreshing the script and loading any new changes. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, like with all of our tutorials, we set the name and date in the main files. So if we go to cart HTML, let's put our name and today's date to get started. Okay, and I'm just going to copy these two values, and we can head over to tc_order.js, and these files should be already open, and we'll just do it 3 times here. Okay, and tc_cart, not the PNG, but the JS file. There we are. Okay, and as you can see, this tc_cart JS file is going to be the main file we are working on, just because it is blank and only contains comments. And let's note a few things. So in JavaScript, multi-line comments are the / and asterisk, and we can also note that the use strict declaration is up way at the top here, and that's because we want no syntax errors in our files. So everything is good on runtime. So let's get started. So scroll down the file, and directly below the H1 heading titled shopping cart, insert a div element with the ID cart. Okay, so they don't specify a file, but since they're mentioning HTML, we can assume that it's this tc_cart HTML file. So all we have to do is scroll down, find the shopping cart heading H1, and this is line 49 for me. Might be a little bit different for you, but around that general area. And we're just going to create a div with the ID of cart. And of course, because it's singular, we know it's just one element. Otherwise, it would be a class. Okay, so let's go ahead and check that. All right, so that passes. Okay, so make sure the cart is in there, because we will be using the document object to insert HTML dynamically, okay, with inner HTML. Okay, let's move on to 3 of 5. So what we have here is we have to go into the tc_order.js file and create a number of arrays. So we're going to make some space here, and it says create an array named item that contains the ID numbers of the items. Okay, there's 4 items in the array. So we'll start off by var and item, and this is equal to, we'll use bracket notation for arrays, and we can just start punching in the numbers. And because the data type is a number, we are not using double quotes or single quotes here. And that's important because if we were to do any computation or arithmetic on these, they would need to be true numbers and not inside of double quotes, denoting a string or something like that. Okay, so let's just make sure our numbers are correct. Just double check that before we proceed. And we're going to kind of do this step by step. So let's check this first one here. Perfect. So that passed. And that's a very easy item to do. We just have a numbered array, and you can see we'll have 4 items in our tutorial. Okay. The next one is a little bit different. And actually what we should do is just create a space so they're nice and spaced out here. But it tells us to create an item description, and you can see that Cengage is autofilling these. So we can just click on that or tab it. It works in similar fashion to an IDE or a text editor like VS Code. It will try and autofill these variable names if it knows that this has been used before, okay? Or there's some mention of it previously in the script or in the code. Okay, so this one's going to be a little bit different. As you can see, we have string values. And so we're going to be using double quotes, okay? And what I found to be easier is we just highlight these descriptions. And if I can find my cursor, I'm just going to paste them in there, okay? And then we'll separate them, comma, each element in the array. I'm just having a time finding the cursor. There we go. Okay, and we'll do Tom Laundry now. There we are. And comma, another set of double quotes. And you'll notice once you hit the first quote, double quote, it will automatically enter in that closing quote, double quote. It can be really handy. It just saves on some input. All right, so I'm going to copy the last one. You can right-click copy or control copy, and we're just going to put that right inside here. And when I first did the tutorial, I did notice this section in particular was a little finicky. So we're just going to go ahead and test this, the item description array, and make sure this checks out. And you can see it rejected it. Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, instead of having this formatted like that, I'm going to line break it after each comma. Okay. For each closing array item. Okay, so we have item 1058, 2 on one line, Tom Laundry on another, the Army Navy game, and then finally the protective card sheets. And we can go ahead and test it now. Okay. And actually, I believe this array is correct. It's just, let's see, item description. I just want to double check or do some troubleshooting here. And it says assertion error. So let's see, protective card sheets. Let's see if we can get, and it pretty much gives us the syntax here. Okay, so I notice one thing is there's a period at this very last array item. So I want to cross-reference this with the actual tutorial. Okay, So there is a period there. And let's see where they place that here. Okay. Whoops. No, that's not the right one. Let me go back. And before I move on in the steps, I want to make sure this item description array is good. There we are. So what I've found out is simply do not include the period for the protective card sheets array item at the very end, right after the item number. Okay, that's what was throwing it off, even though you can see here there's clearly a period. Okay, so just leave that out. Otherwise, it will reject it. But you can see this is the format that it wants. Okay. So far, we have item numbers, item description, and now they want us to do item price. Okay, so this is our next variable, so item price, and you can see that follows the camel case convention. We have our bracket notation, and we are, because these are numbers, we're not using the double quotes. And if we want to do any sort of calculations or arithmetic, we have to ensure that these are true numbers as far as data type is concerned, okay? We could potentially use double quotes if we wanted to. We could use parse integer if we wanted to turn a string back into a number. That would work as well, but for this use case, it's going to be a true number. Okay, so for the item price array, we have all a series of 4 numbers here, and we're going to go ahead and just check them now. Okay, that's all good. Perfect, nice and easy. And then finally, they want us to do an item quantity array. And we have 1, 1, 1, and 4. Oh, I should prefix this, or put a var, actually. So it's a true variable declaration. And we're just going to double check this. Perfect. So you can see all of our variable declarations have passed. We started, these are all corresponding or all details of the items. We have the item number, item description, the price, and the quantity. Okay. And in a production or real world scenario, these variables or these arrays would contain dynamic information, most likely coming from a database, right? So these numbers would, these numbers would be populated most likely from a database. And I just kicked myself out of the tutorial. I'll just get back to my position here. Perfect. So as it stands, this is all complete and we are good. Okay, so I'm just going to get my web browser preview up and running. So far, you won't be able to see anything because we haven't created any code to create the table yet. But this TC_order page is now complete. So 3 of 5 is done. Let's move to 4 of 5 now. So we can actually, at this point, close the TC_order JS file and dedicate our attention to this TC_cart.js file. So this is where we're going to be spending or doing most of the work. Okay, so we have to follow the wording very carefully because 405 is indeed the most complex piece in the tutorial itself. Okay, So we are going to be creating comments as well as we go along, but let's read through this. Okay, so open the tc underscore cart.js file, and you will calculate a running total of the cost of the order. Declare a variable named order total and set it to 0. Okay. So oftentimes in JavaScript or other variable languages, you will set an initial value or variable to 0. And what this does is it can do a few things. So you can set this as a global variable. If I were to just leave this empty and just declare the variable with no assignment, that could be considered a global variable in JavaScript, so it's not function scoped. Especially when you're doing calculations, running calculations like order totals, you want to set that initial variable to 0, and you're going to be changing it dynamically. Okay, so let's declare another variable. Actually, you know what we should do is we should create a comment here. So this is going to record the total cost of the customer order. And we'll just give it a space here. So that's nice and easy. The next part here is to declare a variable named cart HTML that will contain the HTML code for the shopping cart. So really what they're saying is we're going to have a cart HTML variable will essentially store the HTML code for the shopping cart table. Okay, so we've dealt with tables previously in our HTML modules, and we're going to be working with a lot of elements that we know already, like the table tag, table rows, table heading, that sort of thing. Okay. But now we need to really pay attention because we have to assume that we're dynamically creating these elements. Okay, so in our heads, because the tutorial doesn't necessarily explicitly state it, so we have to conceptualize it a little bit. So what they have here is a bit of syntax. So we have to create this variable cart HTML. So let's go ahead and do that. And this is going to be equal to an opening table tag. And we know when we're creating tables or other elements dynamically, we typically start with a single assignment here with an opening tag. And then we use the addition assignment operator to add to it. Okay, so we're going to do that for the first bit here. And then on the second line, they want us to add the rest of it. So this is what we're going to do. We're not going to use a variable because we've already declared it, and we'll get an error if we do, but we are assigning it a new value. So let's create opening and closing double quotes and the semicolon at the end. And what we're going to do is highlight everything from the opening table row tag to the closing, and we're just going to insert it in that those quotes. But there's another piece we have to do here, and that's make it all one line. And you can see the color, and various IDEs will do this, or text editors like VS Code. You need to have that on a single line, otherwise it will not recognize it with multiple line breaks, okay? Okay, so what's going on here? We have a table opening tag, and basically we're just setting table headings. So we have item, description, price, quantity, and total. Okay, but we're not done, obviously, because we don't have any closing tags. So let's work on the meat of the table, or the middle contents. Okay, so here's where we start with our looping. So in JavaScript, we've learned there's methods we can loop through or iterate through arrays, one being the for loop, which is very handy and very common. Another common one, for each. So we're applying functions to each item in the array. And then a mapping function where it's in the name essentially, so where we map to specific items in an array, okay? And we can also do callback functions with maps. Okay, so let's read here. So create a for loop that loops through the entries in the item array. Each time through the loop, execute the commands described in the following steps. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to loop through the item array, and we're going to be adding essentially one table row for each item ordered. Okay. All right. And that's essentially what we're doing. So we're setting a for loop. It's going to have a stopping condition, so it's going to be limited to the item length. So we have an item variable and declared in the cart. Sorry, in the order.js file, and we're going to loop through that array, and it's going to have a stopping condition of the length of the array. Okay, the length property. Okay, so let's get this started. Okay, so how we initialize it, or how we write this, is for loops. We have I, which is the index essentially, and we're going to set this to 0 unless you want to start. We know JavaScript arrays start at 0, but you can set this property or this value to whatever index position you would like. So next, we're going to go I, and this is the condition now, is I is less than item length. So we're going to use that length property because, again, for loops can get out of control. So we want to have a stopping condition. And finally, we have the increment operator. And conversely, you could use the decrement. But for our application, we're using the increment. And it increments by 1. Okay, so we have the skeleton of our for loop. And it tells us that each time the loop executes, the command will, and we're going to add HTML code to the cart HTML variable. So we know we are using the assignment, the addition assignment variable, okay? And because it's a data cell here, we essentially want to, we're going to be doing the for loop on it, okay? So let's see what this looks like. So cart HTML plus equals, and initially we're just going to have the table row, okay, because we're creating these dynamically. And just like we did with the opening table tag in the prior step. And then next, we are going to have the data cells, okay? And essentially, this is going to have the item in the data cell. So let's see what that looks like. So we have another cart HTML, addition assignment operator, and we're just going to put double quotes and a semicolon for now. But what we're going to do is we're going to copy this bottom HTML markup, and we're going to input that right in the double quotes. But if we go on to read where item is the current value from the item array, we have to note that this item is essentially a declared variable. If we go back to order, we know item is a variable, an array literal that we can access. But in order to do so, we have to use string concatenation, okay? And so everywhere you see the word item, we have to prepend it and append it with a plus symbol for this string concatenation. So it goes something like this. So we're going to have the opening table data cell tag just closed off with the double quotes. And anytime you see a plus symbol, you have to make sure it's flanked by these quotes on either side. So that's good. And now anytime we see an item, we are going to flank that with the plus symbol here. And just like in our prior code labs, you can see we're actually dynamically grabbing a PNG image, the file name rather, just based on this item variable, which will be the order number or the item number. Okay, so somewhere in the project, you'll have some PNG files that correspond to this item number, okay, which is really neat because if you're looking at production scale or a real life environment, you can name these images their item numbers and call them up dynamically like so, okay. So here again, with the item, we are flanking it by putting in these plus symbols, and then beside them we'll put opening and closing double quotes, okay. So here we're just doing it for the alt, okay. So the alt, again, if you recall in our HTML chapters, is just if the image doesn't load, the user will still have an idea of what is supposed to be there. In this case, it'll be the item number, okay. All right, so that should be good. And let's see if we have a step for this, okay. Let's see if we can test this. The variable steps. So let's do that first and just double check. Okay, so the variable declarations, these two, and sorry, this order total and these two below, they check out. And the for loop doesn't look like we are completely done with it yet, so let's keep reading. Okay, so now, and again, sorry, before we move on, this is called string concatenation or interpolation, also referred to as using string literals. So it could be prepended or by a dollar sign in JavaScript, jQuery, that sort of thing, and curly braces. But here we're just using the plus notation and kind of encasing them in the double quotes, okay? All right. So let's move on. So add the following HTML code to the cart HTML variable to display the description, price, and quantity ordered of the end item. So we have to keep in mind that we are still operating inside this for loop, which means any sort of variable that we declare, we have to attach bracket notation with the I symbol, okay? And what that means is we're iterating through these items, okay? So for each index item, we are going to be placing, these dynamic PNGs or these alts or other items or other variables, and we have to use this bracket notation with the I in order for it to work, okay? All right. Okay, so don't forget the I's at the end of each item. But now they want us to display the description, price, and quantity ordered. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with cart HTML, the addition assignment operator. And we're going to have our double quotes and closing. But here, we are going to just put in this first description here because it'll give us a template for everything else, okay? Again, we're building the data rows or the cells essentially inside the table, and description is actually a variable that we declared in the order.js file. So we have to use camel case. We have to close this opening tag, and we have to put the plus symbol on each side. Okay, we're going to do that. And we can't forget to put the I, okay, because we're inside a for loop. And to iterate through each item description in the array, we have to attach the bracket notation, okay? So we're actually going to do this 2 more times. But instead of item description 3 times, we are putting price, the second one, and quantity Oh, sorry, this should be item price. And we can double check this. You might be wondering, well, what are we referring to here? It's our arrays that we've already set in our order file. Okay. So item price and item quantity, just note the variable names because they have to correspond to variable or array declarations. Okay. Okay, so item quantity, item price, item description, they all have the I's attached to them, and you can see the opening and closing table data cells have double quotes surrounding them. But we'll notice, see, we have a price here, which is prepended by a dollar sign. So of course the price is going to be in dollars or a unit of currency, and that's part of the string variable. So that won't change as far as the format. So we actually put it inside the double quotes here to prepend rather the dynamic item price. Okay. All right, so that is it. And you can tell, by first glance, the tutorial doesn't, leaves a lot out. But just drawing from our experience, we know, well, in order to iterate through the indexes of these arrays, we have to attach the I. And to do proper string concatenation or interpolation or create string literals, we have to use the plus notation and wrap all the markup with double quotes. Okay. All right. Okay, so good job making it this far. We are continuing on. Okay, so this part here is basically we're calculating the cost of the items ordered. Okay, so we have a price and quantity, and in order to calculate the cost, well, we have to times those values and we'll get an item cost. Okay, so we have the markup here. And we can just make a note, calculate cost of the items, and we'll just put the S in parentheses, just because, of course, you could just order one item. Okay, and here you'll notice we're still inside the for loop because we have to do it for each item. And so we have a new variable here called item cost, and it's going to be preceded again by a dollar symbol denoting the total item costs. So let's get started. So we have a var, and that's going to be item cost. That's equal to item price. And yes, we still have to use the I times item quantity. And simple arithmetic here. And again, we're inside the loop doing these calculations, okay? All right, so just watch the syntax, make sure everything is good there, and a simple arithmetic function there to get the item cost, okay? Okay, the second part here is add the value of the item cost variable to the order total variable to keep the running total. Okay, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Let's see. Add the following HTML code variable to display the cost for the items ordered. So we've done the calculation in the JavaScript, but now we sort of have to template it, right? So we know we have to take our cart HTML now, and we're going to do something similar to what we've done up above. Okay, so we're using the addition assignment operator. And we are going to grab, I'm just going to copy this and throw it into double quotes because it should be nice and easy. So we want to make sure we have the dollar symbol. We're going to change this to item cost because that's what our variable name is, or array name is, even though in the tutorial it just gives us the sort of a hint there. our placeholder. Okay, and again, we're using string concatenation there to display to the user the item cost, okay, or the result of this this arithmetic. Okay, and you notice we have a closing table row, so we're getting to the end of this kind of templating. So that's good. And then finally here, they say add the value of the item cost variable to the order total variable to keep a running total of the total cost of the customer order. So basically, in cases where you have more than one item, you want to have a running total, and we can achieve that simply by going back to this order total that we declared at the top to be 0, and now we're adding, oh, sorry, my cursor there. Now we're going to be using the addition assignment operator to dynamically add the item cost based on that, okay? So the item cost will be, oh, sorry, I added the index. Okay, so the item cost will display the total of the items. So it'll give us a running total essentially, okay? And you know what? We should probably just add a comment here. All right. Right, and make sure that there's no var in front of that order total because we are just now assigning it a value dynamically, okay? So before we proceed, let's do some checks here. So we have the for loop. I think we're complete inside the for loop, so let's check that. Okay, so that's passed. And then we have the third step here, for loop completion. So let's have a look at this heading. So after the for loop has completed, so those words mean we're outside of the closing bracket, outside of the for loop, and you have to be careful, right? Because a lot of times people or developers will put a lot of things inside the for loop that don't belong there, and that leads to bloated code or bloated operations. Things are hanging, crashing, and you simply don't want that. So we shared some pro skills in class. You simply want to have what you need inside a for loop. Any calculations that you can do outside of it, keep it outside. Okay, everything you see inside this for loop needs to be in here because we have to make these calculations based on these individual items, their prices and quantities. Okay, so everything that needs to be in there is. Okay, so let's read on. After the for loop has completed, add the following HTML code to the value of the cart HTML variable, completing the shopping carts table. Okay, so just like we did before, we have this opening tr, and we're actually going to include this because we're going to have a single column span line, or the data cell rather. And column span essentially is we're going to have 4 columns across. So this subtotal is going to be spanning all 4 columns in our table and giving the user an idea of what the total is. Okay, so let's write a comment first. So write the HTML code into the shopping. Whoops, sorry. Add a table row displaying the total cost of the order. Just like that. And basically, we are using the addition assignment operator again. And what we can do this time is save our fingers a little bit and just create the double quotes here. And what we're going to do is think, let's see here. Yeah, so we're going to grab this first bit because this is going to be the beginning of the table row. And I want to make sure that's all in one line and denoted by the similar color there. And we're going to have that, okay? But now we're going to have a different line here displaying the actual total, or the order total that we calculated above here. Okay, and so we're going to put this table data cell with this closing table row here. Oops. There we are. Okay, but we know the variable is actually called order total, so we have to have the camelcase syntax, and we're actually going to do string concatenation again. And again, we're not in the for loop, so we can't use the I, but we're just using the order total variable, which has already been calculated. And then finally, we are creating our closing table tag. Okay, and let's have a plus symbol there, like so. Okay, and you must be curious as to what this looks like, and we're definitely going to have a look at it. But what are we missing here? We have our wondrous table going on, but we have no actually insertion of the actual table in the document. So I'm going to do the last check here on 405, and if it doesn't pass for you, just pause the video at certain parts, make sure all the syntax is correct, and proceed in the tutorial. Okay. All right. And I'm just going to pause for a bit here, just so students can look at the syntax. Okay. So let's move on to the final step here. So we have a table, but we've not actually inserted it into the document. If you recall from our initial steps, we created a div ID named cart. So now we're going to create some inner HTML code or access the document object. Okay, so we know the document sits at the top of that hierarchy. It's an ID, so we're going to get element by ID, and we're going to use double quotes, and we're going to go cart. Okay, and we're going to set the inner HTML now equal to, and it's going to be equal to our cart HTML, which we have built. Right. And let's see if that passes the check here. All right, it does not. And let me just double check here. Cart. Let me just do some troubleshooting here. All right. So anytime you see like a close 100% difference, it's usually something to do with the linking to the document. So let's go to the HTML page, and let's just make sure this div ID cart is available, and it should be. And I'm gonna just run the build website, and that is good. And keep in mind that this passed the check. So it should be running. Next, I'm going to go back to the cart HTML. And so I have document get element by ID, inner HTML, cart HTML. And I'm just checking the syntax here and making sure everything is good. Okay. And you can see nothing is showing it on our browser. And I kind of ran into this issue before, and I believe it was something finicky with the actual HTML document. Because what happens is the HTML document, oh, excuse me, one sec here. Just be a little finicky as far as where the ID is placed. And just make sure everything is noted by that syntax there. And let's run this again. Okay, ID card, that's good. Okay, so now I have to do some troubleshooting here because it's not showing. Okay, and this would be a critical point. Let's see if we add a period here, if that is going to work. Okay, so we know this is good. I'm gonna just double check my opening and closing tags. And again, this is use strict. So any sort of syntax error is going to give us an issue, and I can demonstrate that just by taking it out. And you can see if I refresh the page, well, a little bit is showing, but still not working. Okay, so what I'm going to try is I'm going to try inspecting the inspection tab. And because we're in a sort of sandbox-like environment, I'm not sure if we'll be able to glean anything, but let's see. Yeah, okay. No, it's not going to tell us anything just because we are in Cengage. But if I go into the browser localhost, okay, and this is a great exercise. So you can see I'm using the DevTools console, and it says I is not defined at card.js line 26. Okay, so let's go back and let's see where I have errored. So right, I believe at this for loop execution, oh, I am supposed to declare the I because JavaScript is saying, hey, I does not exist, but we need to now declare it. So sorry, just make sure that variable is there. And so var I equals 0. And let's see, item length. Perfect. Okay. So var I equals 0. And I fixed that, but let's see if there's any other errors. So that actually cleared the error. But let's go back now and just make sure. I'm going to close this. Okay, so my ID is good. Cart is good. Perfect. And just out of curiosity, I do want to run that check now. No, okay. So let's see what the error is. Okay, we still have this difference, and you can see it's only slightly diminished that. Okay. But we did discover one error, and again, that's really practical, and I want students to know that using the dev tools is what it's there for, essentially. Okay, so there's some syntax error on this second to last part here where we added a table row displaying the total cost of the order. It was a slight issue that I wasn't aware of, so please just ensure that your syntax is like so. Okay, But you can see in our view, we now see the dynamic table with the subtotal. Okay, and let's expand that. And we have all the items. They're PNGs, so somewhere in the project, we should see PNGs with these item numbers, and surely we do. And we have the price, quantity, and total is undefined. That's another treat that we can figure out here. So let's figure that out. So we have item price, item quantity, but it's saying it's undefined. So let's check that out here. And I believe it's because I've put this item I here. Right, so the item cost will be a result of this item price times item quantity equation. Okay, so sorry, leave the I out of that. And once we run this, we should get the totals. Okay, and you can see. Perfect. And let's open that for preview. All right, so very good. We ran into some issues. We used the console log on our localhost environment. And you're definitely gonna run into syntax issues, especially when you're using strict in any of these. And just make sure you're troubleshooting things and just checking the critical elements, like did I load the data into the element? Is that correct? Proper linking, or the variable names correct, capitalization, and so on. Okay. All right, so let's verify the last step. That should pass. Great. And again, it tells us that we can verify our HTML with W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium. It's good practice as developers. But otherwise, the tutorial is finished. So good job, everyone. If you had any issues, just go back in the code and pause the video and just see where you went wrong. Again, in software development, troubleshooting is a skill. So let's go into tasks, make sure these are all green. If not, just go back and troubleshoot some items rather. And let's submit and confirm. And that's it. So thank you everybody for watching and listening. This is another case study video tutorial for client-side web development, Trophy Case Sports, and that's found in Module 10. All right, we will see you next time, and have a good one.